Welcome everyone to the captive audience. I'm Kevin Horn. We have a very special report episode coming to you from the southern border. The contingent of state legislators led by Senator Tim Knopp are at the border, and you're getting a live report from what they're seeing here on the 29th of April. Senator, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. It's great to be with you. State Senator Tim Knopp here at the border of Arizona, Mexico, and California. And what we've witnessed this morning is a significant amount of police presence, both border patrol, as well as county and city of Yuma sheriff's departments. They're all working together. They're on the same radio system. They are committed to trying to secure our border. Unfortunately, the federal government is not that helpful. There has been a helicopter that's been circling here that's likely Homeland Security. And what we've learned this morning is that 50% of all the fentanyl that is coming to the United States is coming through the Arizona border. It's dangerous and it's deadly. So this group of Oregon state senators and state representatives are here on really a fact-finding mission, and seeing is believing down here. And we've been joined by a county commissioner, I think they call them supervisors here, as well as multiple people from the Border Security Alliance, who again are committed to better policy for our border. And we're making multiple stops in multiple locations this morning. This particular border the fence is a Trump fence, and there are other parts of the border here that we're going to see. But it took President Biden 18 months to do the amount of border fence that Trump did in 2 weeks. And so you can see the lack of commitment from the president, the Democrats, and our federal delegation.
Getting a little audio interference now all of a sudden. Was it the wind or something? Might have been the wind.
It probably is, Kevin. The conditions here are hot, and there's a little bit of wind. So there's going to be a little bit of interference, but there are open spots on the border wall, but they are enforcing the border right here, but that isn't true in all areas. And they've been overwhelmed by the amount of people coming across, to the point where the detention facilities are full and they just can't even take any more. So this is a crisis of epic proportions that is being driven by federal policy, by the Democrats, and by President Biden.
There we go. Audio's better now.
Oh, yeah. Well, sorry about that, Kevin. So we believe that it is important to educate the public on what is happening, and to make sure that we have the best policy as it relates to our border, because our borders need to be secure. We need legal immigration. We want immigration. We just want it to be legal. And we want people to be protected, both Americans and those who are crossing. And the people who are crossing are being exploited in so many ways, through labor trafficking, through human trafficking. Later today, we're going to visit a child advocacy center, as well as a hospital down here right near the border, to hear about the impacts that are happening. We heard from a state representative last night from Arizona that he said this issue is now so significant that every state is a border state, because people who are here illegally are going to every state in the nation and creating significant issues, because we don't know who these people actually are. What we do know is that people that have been caught, some of them have been criminals, some of them have been linked to terror organizations, and many of them have been linked to the drug cartels and are trafficking people across the border. They sometimes call those people coyotes that bring the people across the border. And so we are spending the day here on the border, and we think it's such an important issue that needs to be explored, and that people of Oregon needs to be educated. And we appreciate the opportunity to be on your show today.
So there, I saw the article, the coverage from Oregon Capitol Chronicle of your trip, and there's a fair number of state legislators traveling with you. Maybe you could tell us what that's like, having all of them with you, and what your the rest of your visit is going to look like today.
Well, it's so we're going to stop at 2 or 3 more locations here at the border to see different types of wall, because there's Bush wall, there's Obama wall, there's Trump wall, and there's Biden wall. And as you might guess, the Biden wall is not quite as secure as some of the other. And it's been great to be here with multiple colleagues of mine, both senators and representatives. And we are, really digging into what is happening here. We were just down at the Colorado River, which is where, unfortunately, they've lost 5 lives already this year. The last one was a father who tried to save his son while they were crossing the border here in the Colorado River. It doesn't look like it's moving very fast, but the undercurrent is pretty significant. So a father lost his life trying to save his son, and that's the 5th one this year. So the idea that there isn't human tragedy, or this isn't an important issue, the Democrats are just hiding from it. And they need to get real about the policies that need to happen in order to protect Americans and to protect the immigrants who are coming here and wanting to work. Because again, we want legal immigration, not illegal immigration, and not knowing who's here and just having our borders overrun. They did say that at this particular point on the wall, this particular area, this year there's been 116 different nationalities that have been stopped here at this particular crossing. A few crossings down, it's about 156 nationalities that have been stopped and detained. So that gives you a pretty good idea that this is not just a Mexican border issue with the United States. It's again 116 countries have been represented of detainees at this particular border.
So the federal law enforcement is literally screaming at the top of their lungs that they are facing organized Mexican-based cartel groups that are actually doing this. So those are the people who really control our border, right? And you've got all these local officials you're talking to, they can't do anything to stop those guys.
Kevin, the cartels have effective control of the U.S.-Mexican border right now. We're going to have to go because we're loading up to go to the next location, and hopefully we'll be able to join you again soon.
Great. We'll look forward to that, and we'll talk. And we're back, everyone, and it's been a day of sightseeing, border style, for Senator Knopp and the rest of the state legislators that traveled to the southern border. And now here we are, joined by Senator Knopp once again, kind of fill us in on where he's been and where he is now and what he's seen.
Thanks, Kevin. We had 4 stops along the border, saw different border walls, and heard from several different people about what's happening along our southern border. We were right near the California, Mexican, Arizona border, and we saw multiple examples of border walls. The Trump wall was the tallest and most, I would say, most likely to secure the country. And the wall on the Native American tribe reservation was pretty porous. It was an old school wall, but wouldn't really stop anyone. And we heard about the victims and the impact that this is having. The youngest victim was a 4-year-old boy who was wandering around in the middle of the night with a note pinned to his jacket that said that his mother was in South Carolina and had a phone number. And pretty sad deal. So, we heard about a 10-year-old boy who was raped and pretty much left for dead on the border. And that trauma is repeated over and over again, many times on a daily basis. And Kevin, these are all people of color. And so the idea that somehow Democrats simply do not care, because they don't. They won't come down to the border. They won't engage on this issue. They won't come up with a policy that is going to protect both American citizens and those who are trying to get to this country. And they're willing to just flood the country. We have no idea who these people are in most cases. But in the cases we do know, there are, quite frankly, some very dangerous people that are in that group. Many people are just coming here to try to get a job and to work. And we need legal immigration. But what we saw today and what's actually happening on this border is, truthfully, it is one of the worst and most horrendous policy failures I've ever seen.
Well, and so also, if most of them are looking for work, that's really not the basis for the claims that are being made. That's just loading up the entire immigration court system with all these folks. Apparently, they're being told, I think, to claim asylum and file a case for that, which they don't. Then they get let into the country, and they don't really have any consequence for failing to show up for that hearing, which can be years. And so you're encountering people that, it's like the old jelly bean jar, right? Where you've got a whole bunch of jelly beans in the jar, but one of them will kill you. Um, and so there might be a whole bunch of people that are wanting to come in just to get jobs who don't really have a basis for. But then there's the individuals mixed in with them that are actually here to do great harm and are doing great harm to our country. So what are some of the things that you heard about the dangerous individuals that you mentioned?
Well, so the cartels essentially control the U.S. Mexican border, and the border security agencies do the best they can to protect the border. Unfortunately, the Biden administration has not given them the the tools. In fact, they've removed sensors and cameras, and lights that the border agents need to do their jobs. And so it's not just that we're being overwhelmed and overrun, especially in the Tucson district, but in the Yuma district, they literally are taking away tools that they had and equipment that was installed, and they've allowed that equipment, the Biden administration has allowed that equipment to be sold on the internet for pennies on the dollar. And, this is sensitive cameras, sensors, lighting that border agents need to do the job. We need to have all the technology that's available, plus we need the right amount of border agents in order to deal with this. And you need a message that you can't come to America unless you're coming legally, because the people that are coming legally deserve their place in line and in America. And they lose that place when so many people come in illegally and just flood the country. For instance, there was one border area where they literally had to shut down for 2 months just to process the people that had come in illegally and had either surrendered themselves or gotten caught by border agents. And they are obviously trying to do what they can as border agents to keep us secure, but they feel very underappreciated, overworked, and lacking in the equipment that they need to get this job done. And we need to be outraged as public officials, and we need to engage on this issue. And as Americans, Americans should be appalled at what is happening on their southern border, and quite frankly, now on our northern border. We have fentanyl coming in on both the northern and southern border, and a very significant portion of the fentanyl that comes in Arizona.
You
I
said 50% earlier, didn't you? Something on that order?
It's about 50%. And of that, a good percentage of that have deadly doses in it. And it's the Chinese and the cartels that are essentially working in tandem, sometimes together, sometimes not, to create thousands and hundreds of thousands of pills and try to move them across the border. And they are indeed deadly. We have seen over and over again young people, elderly, what have you, who have taken fentanyl, or in some cases taken something that they didn't think had fentanyl in it but did, and it killed them.
Yeah.
I heard a story about somebody who was in the construction industry and was getting their life straightened out, and went to spend some time with friends in California. And this is a father of a young daughter, and he never came home. He died of a fentanyl overdose, probably unintended, but nonetheless died. And those are the types of stories that are being replicated over and over again all across America, because there is unwillingness by the Democrats in control to deal with this issue. And this is a big issue for a majority of the American people and of Oregonians. They want this issue solved. They want border security, and they want legal immigration. So that's what we're focused on. We're trying to look at potential legislation coming out of this trip. This is not simply to come down here and take some photos near the wall and say, oh, look at this. This is not a political photo op. This is what can we do policy-wise to turn the tide, because we recriminalized hard drugs, because Republicans stuck together and did what we needed to do. And now time is to turn our efforts on the drug epidemic and try to stop the supply and curtail the supply from coming in, and at the same time save the lives of people who are being used in that process to to commit crimes, either human trafficking, labor trafficking, or drug trafficking, and so or sex trafficking. So this is a serious issue that needs the attention of Oregonians and of policymakers in Oregon.
It's interesting because you mentioned that Democrats are unwilling to do something about it. And sometimes they do pay attention to polls. We saw what was about to happen with the Measure 110 efforts, but they seem, many of them, I'll give you one example. Val Hoyle running is representative in Congress. She said, we need this movement across the border. And she's joined hands with several other members of Congress who want to facilitate even more of what's already happening. They repeatedly at the federal level, because it is a federal responsibility to secure that border, even though it's really everybody's interest, right? And they refuse to take even the steps of deporting somebody who commits a crime after they get in to the United States, that Lake and Riley Act. And so is there something that can be done at the state level to address this? Because obviously Texas is a state that's now taking this quite a bit more seriously than certainly Arizona and California. And I've heard very recently, actually, Darrell Issa, a congressman from California, said, guess what? Texas is starting to do something about their border. And so now it's all moving west towards Arizona and California because those states aren't.
Right. So one of the things we can do in Oregon is work with our federal law enforcement officials to uh, imprison and otherwise deport people who are committing crimes. The last thing any American should want is for those who want to commit crimes and to do evil acts against their fellow man to be in our country. And so I think that we need action from the executive branch in Oregon and from the legislature in Oregon in the 2025 session. I think this should be a big issue, and I think we should join and support the people who are on the front lines down here trying to make a difference. And Governor Abbott in Texas is trying to make a difference. The Arizona legislature, which is controlled by Republicans currently, is trying to make a difference. And we will meet with Arizona legislators tomorrow, and we're going to talk about how they can support kids and how they can, and how we can support them on border policy.
I noticed in some of the stats you sent me that you've obtained down there. Well, one of the things it says is that they use youth to take youth across the border.
They,
What is the reason for that? And it looks like they do it in the like between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. is the peak time.
They do. I mean, they use anybody and everybody they can in the most efficient way possible, and the underage kids are more likely to be able to be used again and again for these purposes, kind of used as coyotes, so to speak. And several of these people have been arrested half a dozen times, and the border agents are very frustrated by what's happening. And the statistics are just unimaginable of the not only the flood of people, the lack of knowledge of who they actually are, and they're just being let loose in America. And they just go wherever. They don't show up for hearings. I think it was less than 20% of people. It might have even been less than 10% of people actually show up for their hearings after the fact, and after they've been released in America. And so just imagine what kind of a security issue that really is.
Well, and if I think about Oregon, we support ourselves as a sanctuary state, which was originally described as, well, when somebody comes here to wash dishes or pick fruit, that we don't want, Customs and Border Patrol or ICE or whatever grabbing and deporting them. But actually, those sanctuary state laws are being used consistently as kind of a magnet for Oregon, right? And it even protects the folks that are coming in and just bringing fentanyl and distributing it in Portland and Bend and Eugene. Those guys are kind of in this revolving door justice system, and they get protection. Is that something that can be addressed at the state level? Do you think? Is it
Well,
is it time?
no, I think it can be addressed because what's happened because of the failed policy on decriminalization of drugs, which we have now reversed, thank goodness. But we need the state agencies to work with us on drug endangered children and other areas to make sure that we're protecting everybody. But there are no less than 5 cartels that are on the ground in Oregon that are working. And it's not just hard drugs or marijuana that they are distributing. One of their biggest new in the last few years, one of the newest things that they're doing is they are very organized in human and labor trafficking, because they can use these people over and over and over again. And when they're done with them, they simply just throw them away and go get more. And it's horrific. And so anybody who is a humanitarian and believes in human rights should be on the side of justice and the side of security, the side of freedom. And that's why I think it's so important that the legislature address this issue.
Well, it's ironic. I think was it the last election cycle? There was a ballot initiative that was intended symbolically to ban slavery in Oregon, if you recall. But they actually didn't ban slavery because that's exactly what you just described. People are brought in as human trafficked. They're used often in the sex trade, or they're used for illegal marijuana grow, picking, you name it, right? And or as traffickers themselves. And these folks are essentially indentured servants whose families would be killed if they don't comply and just simply work all the time in terrible conditions, inhumane conditions. Can we ban this new slavery in Oregon? I mean, is there a chance of doing that?
Uh,
Maybe the Democrats would go for that.
yeah, I mean, it is against the law. Human trafficking, sex trafficking, and so on is against the law. But we need to make the penalties such that they become a deterrent for this type of evil actions. And we have to bring justice back to the equation. Real justice, not second chances for for drug dealers, because honestly that's the policy of the state right now. Uh, Governor who let 1,000 people out of prison, most of which were drug dealers, and they weren't just minor drug dealers; they were serious drug dealers, and many of them had weapons charges as well, because you don't go to prison in Oregon for simply selling drugs. So you usually have to do something else that includes some sort of a person-to-person crime. So
Yep.
uh, there are some serious crimes that are being committed, and it's not the policy of the state to actually punish those crimes. And I think you should have to pay for ruining someone else's life. I don't think you should get second chance free pass. We had people who committed murder, capital murder, who have been charged and convicted and sentenced to life in prison without parole, that were let free by the governor,
Yeah.
not the governor, the last governor. And if you care about gun violence, it seems to me like the first people you in prison would be those, I don't know, who committed gun violence. So, the policy and the ridiculous nature of the policies that are happening have to come to an end, because they're endangering the lives of Oregonians.
And it's super expensive, all of this, right? So the southern border, everything, all these consequences have unleashed a torrent of spending just to cope with it, right? Some of this information you sent to me, the last 3 years, 14 billion on welfare. There was another figure here, I'm not sure what it's referring to, but 157 billion total in spending. This is an enormous cost to a country where we say we don't have enough money to even have sufficient police protection in many parts of the state. We don't have enough money to fund super high priorities, education, and we also apparently lack the money at times to make sure that our own homeless that already exist on the streets can get drug treatment and recovery, and yet we're spending an enormous sum on this flow across the border. Uh, what do you think the consequences are going to be? Is that going to resonate with people? Just the sheer cost.
I so money is one thing, and it's bad, but the cost in human lives, the cost of trauma to the people involved, and the long term toll of this drug culture and human trafficking, sex trafficking, labor trafficking is immeasurable in terms of the damage it's doing to our society. And we have to put an end to it. And it is modern day slavery. It absolutely is modern day slavery. And um, this shouldn't be a Republican issue, because independents and many Democrats want to put an end to it. That's why we recriminalize hard drugs. We need to take this next step and work on border security and anything we can do to support law enforcement to get justice for people who have had crimes committed against them. Many times, the people who are coming here illegally, because they're vulnerable, and they need sometimes as much help as the citizens who are having crimes perpetrated against them.
Yeah. No, that's right. I mean, the people that are being smuggled and the people that are they're actually controlled by the cartel. You said there's 5 cartels operating in Oregon. Well, they pretty much I think it's not just the border they control.
Very true. I mean, there's going to be a point at which we are no longer going to be able to control our own streets, and we're getting to that point. And this whole movement that's happened to defund the police and all that, all driven by the liberal leftist Democrat agenda, is complete hogwash. Everybody knows it. It's done so much damage, and the people who are pushing it are a bunch of hypocrites because what they do, these politicians, they get their own private security while they let the rest of the people suffer. And we just can't have that. And, this can't happen in America. And so we need to reverse those incredibly bad policies. And the only way to do that is to vote out the people who have perpetrated and believe these policies and put people in there that are actually going to get something done that's good for Oregonians and for Americans.
It was interesting when you said about the high tech equipment that's been removed and being sold. That's exactly what they told us they wanted to use instead of building a wall
Yep,
years ago.
exactly. And I mean, we're hearing directly from the people on the ground that this is happening. They showed us the cameras. They showed us where they had taken them down. They showed us the ones that were inoperable. Uh, One of the only things they've left on the border, the federal, Biden administration, is really the lights and the border fence in some areas. They've removed some stuff, but the good news is that in some of these areas, at least the areas we saw today, for the most part, we're covered by a border fence.
Well, this is going to be obviously something you're going to talk to Democrats about, and some of them aren't going to pay attention, right? And maybe they have to be replaced. So, what kind of political consequences do you think might come now that you've seen how bad it is, and you're bringing this story back to Oregon? You're shining a light on it. Um, what do you think the repercussions could be politically? Because if you can't negotiate with somebody, maybe you just have to replace them.
Yeah, well, the voters of Oregon, the people of Oregon, are going to have to make those decisions. And before they make those decisions, they need to be educated because lots of these stories aren't being told. They literally had to put a border fence in place in an area that is a farming community because millions of dollars of tractors were being stolen and taken to Mexico on an annual basis. And in order to actually run their farms, they had to have a fence put in, and there was reluctance to do it, and they put in a type of fence that was likely to either slow down or stop the ability for people to, criminal cartels, organizations to steal these tractors, which are hundreds of thousands of dollars sometimes, and take them across the border. And it was interesting because you can see basically the same crops are being grown on the American side and on the Mexican side of this border. And so, when somebody comes over to the American side and steals your equipment and then heads back over to the Mexico, that seems like a problem to me and a solvable one. We just need again to have the security and the safety that Americans should expect from their government.
That seems to be a fundamental basic, and it is actually the number one job of government, isn't it? So that's what we're reminding everybody of. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us, give us a summary. Is there anything else you guys are doing today? You're kind of looks like you've done some of the touring, and now you're kind of in an office setting, taking a break there to talk with us.
Yeah, well, we're taking a break from the tour of the hospital here to hear the impacts about what's going on here at the Yuma Regional Medical Center. And we do need to get back to hearing about that. I really appreciate being with you today, Kevin, and with your audience. And we look forward to being back in Oregon soon.
Well, safe travels, both down there and on the way back. And thank you for bringing this important information to us. And everybody who's watching this, please share this with everyone you can. This is super important. It probably is going to determine what happens here in 2024 as the top issue on people's minds. So we have an opportunity to fix it, but we got to let people know. So thanks again for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you much.
All right. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you on the next episode of The Captive Audience. And we appreciate Senator Knope and his team joining us here today. We will be back tomorrow night with another episode of The Captive Audience.